This is your study guide for lessons 1-3 to 1-5. This study guide, like all my study guides, is a twin of the quiz. So the questions that you are seeing today are going to be very, very much like the questions you will see on the quiz. Now take your time filling this out. You can use it tomorrow on your quiz, but it's not going to be helpful to you if you don't do a good job on it. So the idea is to write down your hints, your tips, your advice, so that it is useful for you tomorrow. Now, if I'm going too fast, I want you to pause, catch up, and then start me again. And there's no reason you can't back me up and listen to something a second time or a third time. All right, let's go ahead and start with question number 1. We're going to be finding the approximate value of a square root, and we want an approximate value. So that means we are estimating. So it says, what is the approximate value of the square root of 27 to the nearest 10th? So we've got a couple of strategies we've been using. We can use our perfect squares to guess and test. So 27, the square root of 27, that's not in our perfect square list. It is right between 25, which is a perfect square, and 36, which is a perfect square. So I'm going to say to myself, what times itself is 25? And that's 5. What times itself is 36? That's 6. So I know it's somewhere between 5 and 6. It's actually closer here than it is here. So it's going to be 5 point something, something low, 5.1, 5.2, around in there somewhere. If we were just doing to the nearest whole number, I'd say it's 5. But since we need to the nearest 10th, our second strategy is to use a calculator. So you would pick up your handy calculator. You would hit your square root key. You'd put 27 in there. And you're going to get an irrational number. It looks like this. So now we're in rounding land. I need to the nearest 10th. So I'm going to find the decimal and my first digit. And then I'm going to cut my number off after that. I look at the number right after that cut line. If it's a 0, 1, 2, 3, or 4, I get rid of it. It's not big enough to make any difference. But if that number is a 6, 7, 8, or 9, it's going to cause me to round up. So to the nearest 10th, it is approximately 5 and 2, oops, I wrote that wrong, 5 and 2/10. So 2 strategies. Use your perfect square to guess, or use a calculator. All right, I want you to pause me while you get your workbook out. I want you to go to page 26, number 16. So I'm going to pause right here and wait for you. Okay, so this one says that we want to put something in order from least to greatest. All right, so let's think about our strategies. The first thing that I might do is I might make sure that everything is in the same format. So let's convert everything to decimals. Okay, now I've got my decimal forms. I can start to compare. Well, I know negatives are smaller than positives. So that simply means anything that's negative is going to come first. But what if I have more than one negative? I need to remember that negatives count backwards. From 0. Do you need to look at a number line? Maybe. Okay, so I've changed everything into decimals. I've placed my negative numbers, and then my positive numbers count forward from 0. And then finally, please use the original format. So that means if I gave you square root of 4, I don't want to see 2. I want to see square root of 4. Now, I did a lot of writing here. You may not have room in your tiny little box for this, and I'm sorry, but you could totally turn your page over and write on the back side. All right, I'm going to give you a minute to go back to page 22, example number 1. Between which two whole numbers did the length of the diagonal fall? Which whole number is it closest to? All right, so we have the square root of 74. That is not on your number line, or I'm sorry, your perfect square list, but it is between 64 and 81. You're going to ask yourself, what times itself is 64? What times itself is 81? And then you're going to decide which whole number is it closest to. These are 10 away. These are 7 away. It appears that the square root of 74 is between 8 and 9, but closer to 9. All right, the next two problems on your quiz, numbers 4 and 5, are going to be similar to each other and like page 31, number 10. So I'll give you a second to go back and get to the right page. Make sure that you pause me if you need to. All right, number 10 says the volume of a cube is 512 cubic inches. What is the length of each side? So sometimes drawing a picture lets you visualize a little bit better. So I'm going to draw my cube here. And I know that I am going to be in 3 dimensions. So over here, if you use a square root, you're in 2 dimensions. That would be a square. That would be things like area problems, 2 dimensions. If you're going to use a cube root, that means you're in 3 dimensions, so it'd be like a cube or volume. So once you've decided if you're doing a square root or a cube root, then make sure you're looking at the question. What does your answer represent in the context of this problem? Well, your answer will be one side of the figure. It would be how much is this? Question number 6 is like page 32, number 14. So I'll give you a second to look at that. It says Mrs. Drew wants to build a square sandbox with an area of 121 square feet. What is the total length of wood Mrs. Drew needs to make the sides of the sandbox? All right, so step 1, you're going to have to decide, do I need a square root or do I need a cube root? And since it's a square sandbox and we're talking about area, then square root is the winner chicken dinner. So I need to make sure to answer the question, what is the total length of wood? That sounds very much like perimeter. When you're doing perimeter, you are going to add all 4 sides. So in this case, I'm going to want to figure out the square root of 121. Here's my sandbox. Each side, because the square root of 121 is 11, the bottom's 11, the right side's 11, the top is 11, and the left side is 11 for an answer of 44. But we had other questions like this one. So this was the frame and the sandbox. But if you remember, we also had an iguana problem. Ooh, that's a bad color for me to write on blue. Let's try this. An iguana problem. And on that one, the question asked us for the area of the face. I think we were doing the top of the crate or the cage, and we had to do length times width. So we still had to find our square root, but the question was different. So I want you to pay attention. Perimeter, add all 4 sides. If I want the area of a face, well, then you're going to take length times width. We had one more. We had the birdhouse problem. And on that one, we wanted the total surface. And we took the area of each face times 6. So we start off the same on all of these problems. We found out how much one side was. If that's all they want, great. If they want perimeter, add all the way around. If they want an area of one face, take length times width. If they want the total surface area, find length times width times 6. All right, go ahead and turn in your workbook to page 37. Questions 7 and 8 on your quiz are going to be very much like number 10 and number 13. So I will pause here for a minute to let you get to where you need to be. All right, question number 10. Solve v squared equals 47. To undo a square, we will square root. When you square root, you will have 2 answers. So for example, if I said j squared, let me do this down here. If I said j squared is 169, to undo that, I would square root 169, and I could have either a positive or a negative 13. There are 2 solutions possible for a square root problem mathematically. We know in the real world sometimes that second answer doesn't make sense, but mathematically I can have 2 answers for a square root problem because both positive 13 times positive 13 is 169, and negative 13 times negative 13 is also 169. But what if we have a cube root problem like number 13? Or like this one. What if I have j cubed is 111? Well, you undo a cube by cube rooting. And my answer is going to be an irrational number. So it's, let's see, 4.805895553. Okay. But I can only have the positive. Because if you remember, I'm going to take three numbers together, three identical numbers to get 111. There's no way to take a negative times a negative times a negative and get a positive answer. They all have to be positive. So there is only one solution to a cube root problem, and it will always be positive. All right, that is what your quiz is going to look like. There are 8 questions. Remember that you have a resource page you can go to. You can practice IXL, you can look at extra videos, you can do extra problems out of the workbook. All right, good luck. I will see you tomorrow.